Hello and welcome back to Homeschool Together. Thank you guys for so much for joining us on our endless journey around the world and through history on our vlog as we, do videos of our curriculum and talk to you guys about all the books and videos and everything. Thank you so much for following along. We really appreciate you. We know there's those people that are watching along in real time. We appreciate it. We're going to get to the end sooner or later.
It's going to be a little while.
This was week 3 of Egypt. I mean, it was a good journey. I think one,
Yeah.
2, 3. I think it's a perfect amount of time. I think right at the end here, I'm like, okay, I'm done with Egypt. I'm ready to move on.
We ended up doing about 3.5 weeks because there were some extra things we wanted to
Yeah.
include, but mostly 3 weeks felt like a pretty good chunk of time.
I felt like we covered it in the way the history of Egypt is split up between the early kingdom, middle, and the new kingdom. I think it fits nicely for you to just kind of like chunk your way through the time periods that way. So this week as promised, we studied Tutankhamun, King Tutankhamun. Obviously, one of the great discoveries of all time, as our dog is now moving and shifting her spot closer to us.
She's an old lady.
She's an old lady.
She's 9.
She's 9. So we studied Tutankhamun, and we finally got through a lot of books on that. And then we also studied hieroglyphics. It's one of the great discoveries of modern times was finding the Rosetta Stone and being able to crack that hieroglyphic code in the last 150 years. So it was a really, really amazing achievement. So we spent a little bit of time on it.
Yeah, I think the first week and this week were my favorites. The middle week was interesting, but the beginning was all about pyramids and stuff, and that was really fun. And this stuff all about Tut, and because there's so many documentaries and many great books that we'll show in a minute here.
Absolutely.
I think that this was a really great. It like ended on a high note.
It did end on a high note. Now, something we've been doing is trying to find some books. We're trying to help you guys at home because we know there are people who do these type of journeys around the world or ancient histories, and they're always thinking about older learners, younger learners. As you're doing these curriculums, you may have to bring someone along, and that's kind of what we're doing with our youngest, our 4-year-old. She's kind of coming along with us. But Ariel is kind of paving an even more exotic path.
Old learner.
Old learners, and she has been reading Mara.
Yeah, so this is called Mara, Daughter of the Nile. This is a fiction book that I've been reading a couple, right? I did The Rise and Fall of Ancient Egypt, and then The Woman Who Would Be King about Hatshepsut. And this one is a fiction about a double agent. I know, it doesn't sound very
Spy
Egyptian.
thriller on the Nile? What is this, Agatha Christie or something?
It's really good, you guys. It's a pretty short read. I think it's only like 250 pages or so. It is about a woman named Mara, who was a slave, and she was purchased from her master by another master who is someone who works for Queen Hatshepsut, and she's going to be installed as the Babylonian interpreter for the new Canaanite princess who's going to be marrying Hatshepsut's stepson, because that's the way that worked, and his name was Tutmos. So basically, she's been hired to infiltrate the court of the prince because they know that there's like this revolution going on. Since she speaks Babylonian, she's the interpreter. So that's her role. She's been purchased in order to be a spy. But then she ends up meeting a guy, this is very early, and he thinks she's very special and doesn't know about her role as a spy, and he hires her to be a spy for him, for the prince, in the same role of interpreter. So she's the interpreter to the princess, and she's secretly in love with the second guy, and she's being like this double agent. And so she's working against the queen, but also kind of against the prince, but looking out for herself. And there's a lot of like intrigue.
So it's a Lakari novel on the Nile.
It's really good, you guys. I have totally dug it. I mean, it's total fiction, but I've been really enjoying it. It's a quick read.
Very immersive. Do you feel this would be something okay for maybe like, a late elementary reader?
No, I think this is a teen reader would be my, not that there's been anything in it.
Where is it on the angsty scale? 0 to Twilight?
No, there's nothing inappropriate in it at all. But I just think that this would be something that a teen would enjoy more than a younger student.
Cool.
But I, as an adult, have been really digging this novel. I've been like anxious to pick it up and keep reading about what's going to happen. It's been very compelling, very thrilling. So if you're looking for, we shared a couple of nonfiction books the last few weeks. If you're looking for something just kind of fluffy and fun fiction, Mara,
set in
Daughter
the
of the
time
Nile.
and the history can teach you a lot about that.
Oh yeah, and there was a lot
culture.
of I'm learning a lot as I'm reading this book.
It's a very dramatic cover.
Yeah, what is this, 1985? So, it's not a new book, but man, really good book. So
All right.
I recommend it for those of you who are looking for a short read, but something for yourselves. This one's really good.
Food Fight. This is a
Yes,
spine.
Yes, we showed this on a previous episode, but we wanted to just give it a quick mention because it only has, I think, like maybe 8 different cultures in it, something like that. And one of them is ancient Egypt, and it talks about what food was like in ancient Egypt. And it has a couple of recipes in it for a hummus and like not a crab cake, a fish cake. So, but anyway, this is a really great book if you're looking for food to do. This is a terrific one, and I think we'll cover it again when we get to Rome. But until then, I don't think that there's anything to do in this book. But it's National Geographic Food Fight, so we showed it previously. But I just wanted to let y'all know it's applicable for this week too.
So one of the chapter books that you start towards I think in this week of Egypt, but it carries forward into early Andes civilizations, and then into the following Mesoamerica week. So the next 3 weeks you're going to be focusing on the Poppy series.
Well,
right?
it's just the book Poppy.
Just the book Poppy, but we have gotten all the books.
Well, our daughter loves a series.
She does.
So
she's a sucker for series, and she's a sucker for animals, anthropomorphized animals.
She really loves it.
And if you've been following and watching the movies, all these shows, I am not a fan of anthropomorphized animals.
So we started with the first book in the series, Ragweed. We decided we would read this first. It's about a mouse who goes from the country into the city where the mice are at war with the cats. And finding friends and dealing with that. So really good. We enjoyed it.
What I didn't like about it was kind of the beatnik
It was
dialogue.
a little bit.
It was a little over the top.
It was a little beatnik.
Avi, what are you doing? The beatnik.
But our daughter
mice.
really enjoyed it. This is a very wholesome book. Everything in it is
very, very sweet. Not even that like dramatic in the
no.
some cat chasing mice scenes, but nothing super dramatic in this book.
Right. So here's the problem with this.
Then there's these 2 prequels before Poppy.
Right. So there's Ragweed and there's Ragweed and Poppy, where Ragweed and Poppy like become like a couple.
Yeah, Ragweed leaves and then he goes.
And we didn't read that one because I didn't have that one. So we ended up skipping to Poppy, which we're in the middle of.
I started Poppy last night, not tonight. Tonight was chapter 2. Should we give him the spoilers?
Well, I just think
very dramatic.
I just think you need to know. This was a very sweet book and really good,
and you really kind of like Ragweed.
And I think you could at this point. I don't know if you could sub it for Poppy, but we'll let you know if we think it's a decent sub.
Well,
but what
opening chapter of Poppy, this guy.
Yeah. In kind of dramatic format.
Very dramatic.
So we didn't know that going into it. We thought, oh, we'll talk about Ragweed. It was such a sweet, wholesome book.
Let's read Poppy
and then, whew,
oh man,
buy Ragweed. So, anyways, if you have a sensitive, our kid was just like,
it's funny because
wait a minute,
he wrote.
what?
If I'm right, he wrote Poppy first, and then he wrote these 2 prequels.
Right.
And I think what people asked was, in the opening chapter, you find out Poppy and Ragweed are like boyfriend girlfriend, and you don't know how that happens, and Ragweed. So soon. And so he went back and wrote the origin story for Ragweed and then the origin story of their relationship, only to have.
I kind of feel like this is like Marvel Black Widow territory, where she dies at the end of Endgame, spoilers, and then you just have another movie afterwards, like she's alive again.
It's a flashback.
Yeah. So, anyways, our daughter just kind of went, wait a minute, what? Oh. And she was not disturbed by it. But if you have a child that will fall in love with a character and then be very disturbed by that character's sudden demise
at the hands of an owl. Down the gullet.
Maybe don't read. Or
skip that first chapter.
And maybe if you read Poppy, and that would be really hard for your sensitive child to read that, then just read Ragweed alone, where nothing super horrible happens.
That's actually something we've been doing this week. Because we started with Ragweed, but I was continuing with the copy work, and that was set in the book for Poppy, and I just had her do that copy work. She was asking me, we didn't read this in the story. I'm like, don't worry about it, just do the copy work.
We'll get there.
And we'll get there, and we were just reading Ragweed as fast as we could so that we can then catch up with Poppy, but...
So, and one of the things is Poppy is given 3 weeks of time in the curriculum, which is a really long time, I think, to stay on this book because it's a pretty short book, and that's why we decided
Chapters are pretty short. You can knock out 2 chapters in an evening without even batting an eye.
Yeah.
They're all about 5-6 pages long.
It's only 200 pages, and so it really reads quick, and we were able to read this in like a week and a half. So that's kind of part of the problem, I think, is that Poppy is scheduled for 3 weeks, but it's pretty short. So we haven't finished Poppy yet, but if you have a very sensitive kid, maybe just read this one. Or if you have a kid who's just going to get attached to a character and not want to see them, then don't read this one and just read Poppy. That's what we'd say. But this was a very cute book, and our daughter really liked it.
Moving along to the classic to you Gen Xers, R.L. Stein's Goosebumps. Curse of the Mummy.
We read this. My daughter and I read this. I'm so excited because
we're scraping the barrel here, guys.
no, this was the first series as a kid that I really got into read, like one of those, stayed up late at night to read, had to get the next book at the used bookstore, was always like trading in books to get new ones. And so this is The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. And it wasn't very scary, and she really enjoyed it. Yep. And I dug reading it with her because that's just a piece of my 90s childhood coming back. So
exactly.
If you have a kid who might like 90s nostalgia, or you might like 90s nostalgia, hit up the Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. And I think there might be like a Revenge. There might be another one.
Revenge of the Mummy, I believe it is.
Revenge?
Yeah. And good alternatives in case you guys don't want to go down the Poppy death spiral.
But I mean, not a lot of.
And there's also
not a lot of like good culture, but it was fun.
There's also the Magic Treehouse Mummy book, the third one in the series.
Mummies in the Morning, which we talked about a couple weeks ago.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about King Tut, because what you're going to run into is there's a lot of options. There's obviously the books and the material that you'll get through the curriculum, through the spines, but there's also a lot of books out there, just stacking as high as you can, because Tut's discovery, while he was not a major king, was a major discovery in the completeness of his tomb. And that's really why it's so important, is because we actually got an unadulterated look into what a full tomb actually was. And so let's first talk about who was King Tut. Now, this was a really, really good book. If you're looking for just that kind of complete overview of Howard Carter's journey to find Tut, to discover it, all the hard work that went into it, and then ultimately going through the history of Tut, that they were able to piece together, who was his parents and where did he fit in the lineage, where was he in the evolution of pharaohs. Really, really good. I really enjoyed this one. Also, you can have the step into reading the Tut's Mummy, Lost and Found. And this is going to be more of a museum level book. This is one of those early readers, step into readers. If you have kind of like an emerging reader who's ready to start reading early chapter books, this is something they might be able to read on their own, or you can read along with them.
It says grades 2 to 3 on it. These have very similar information. This is the longer version of this.
I like these a little bit more because you can actually, there's just more here. These are just a little bit more slim, but it's up to you. If you had to choose or whatnot, you can't go wrong with either one of these. They'll tell the same story. It's just a little bit more, I think, a more mature version here. And it's a little bit more of a...
And this is more visual too. Yeah. There's a lot more. And we did them both. Our daughter really enjoyed both of them, so there's no reason you can't do them both. But they do cover the same ground.
Yep.
So
then another one here called King Tutankhamun Tells All. This was actually a really funny book, and I
liked this a lot.
I liked this one as well because it told the story from King Tut, who in a very sarcastic Tut kind of comes back to life and kind of takes you through a journey of the uncertainty and the mystery around his life, whether trying to figure out how he died, and talking about how the scientists trying to piece together his life and all that type of stuff, and really talking about kind of the struggle of the science and how they discover and how the archaeologists are trying to figure out what happened. They even talked about putting him through the CAT scan machine and analyzing his body and the mummy, and it was really, really cool. But what was funny is that there had Tut was coming through in the book and kind of being sarcastic and everything.
Right, he's like, the back says, like, they say I died from a broken knee, as if. So it just had a funny, different perspective. And as you can see, really great illustrations.
Great illustrations. Sometimes that stuff can be a little over the top when you get those in books. And I know the parents here, you guys, we churn through kids' books all the time, so you definitely get the things you kind of don't like. I have seen other books do kind of the sarcastic thing, and this one did it well. And this is one of the good ones, because sometimes it can get kind of almost mean-spirited in some respects, and I don't like that as much, but this one was just kind of done in a fun and playful manner.
Yeah, we knew this has been on the list for a long time because we actually discovered it when we were in the waiting area of the Chester Beatty Museum in Dublin. Yeah. And our daughter found it and was like, "What's this book about King Tut? Are we going to study Tut later?" And I took a picture of it, and it was in all of our vacation photos, and I was like, "Oh yeah." So you find books in the strangest places.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Anyway, so this is a really good one. Even if you read one of these other two, definitely get this one.
This is the next one. This is one of the spines for this week in the, I believe this is called out in the curriculum as well. It's called Hieroglyphics.
Right, and these are two different things.
Those are two different things, yes, actually. we had them tucked in together.
I think this is something else that we got somewhere else.
There's some throwaway things. Sorry. It was a bookmark. No, so this is a really cool hieroglyphics book talking about hieroglyphics, the nature of the writing, all of the different types of formats. I think they even talked a little bit about the history of it, how it evolved over time. I don't know if they got a little, I think towards the end they got into Demontic, which was kind of the script version of that. But what was really cool is they came with this nice stencil that you're allowed to use. And you can see how it's very worn right now around the edges, and we'll show you that when we get to the art section.
We'll show that.
Yeah, so both girls had a good time doing the artwork and just using the stencils to kind of, just do
This
drawings
was
and stuff.
the interactive element of this one was really fun.
It was a lot of fun. And
this is worth getting. So this isn't one you can get from the library because of the stencil nature. I'm guessing that you can't get it, but I think it's definitely worth purchasing. I think it's pretty affordable. You'll find a link in the show notes. So this is one worth getting because the stencils were part of our girls' favorite part of this week.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it was really good. We really enjoyed it.
And then this was just a hieroglyphic symbols of ancient Egypt.
What I liked about this was
flyer.
It was a little bit more. The hieroglyphics were a little bit more in depth. There was a lot more detail and whatnot, and it really just gave you some more imagination on like how you wanted to use this. This was useful in one of the art activities we'll show in a little bit, where you had to decorate a sarcophagus.
I think this might have been something that our daughter got for Christmas one year. She got a bunch of Egypt stuff for Christmas because she was really into it last year. So I'll find what this is, and I'll put a link in the show notes.
The 5,000-year-old puzzle. So as you're getting into hieroglyphics, one of the great elements of this, and we'll talk about a video here in a short bit, is how they learned how to decipher the hieroglyphics and the importance of the Rosetta Stone. And so this book here, the 5,000-year-old puzzle, talks about the nature of figuring, how these things worked and figuring out the tombs and all these little challenges. So it was really, really cool. And I think it was told sort of like an archaeology story with a young boy. So a lot of fun, very light. I don't think it's not nonfiction, it's fiction based, but it just kind of tells a story around a boy.
Yeah, this was really good because it talked a lot about like the process of finding a tomb. And so so much of this week was about King Tut's tomb and how they found it. This is, the finding of a fictional tomb and, how they would dig and how the tomb was constructed and stuff. So this is actually a really, really good book. We really like this one.
Going to more in depth on the Rosetta Stone is right here is the Seeker of Knowledge, telling the story about the Rosetta Stone and why it was so important and how these linguists and these archaeologists in the 1800s were able to crack the code. It's a beautiful stone, black stone, hieroglyphics, Demontic, and Greek. And the Greek they knew. And they were able to then I think they knew some of the Demontic, but maybe not all of it. But they were able to, in essence, reverse engineer the language back into the hieroglyphics using certain characters and figuring out, what things meant. It was really, really, really important. Great story, great story of like determined archaeology to find the truth and the knowledge and to crack that code. The language code, I think, was super important. And I think the language, because we're starting to talk about kind of the emergence of language, watching a story about more modern individuals trying to figure out how those languages were constructed. Really, really cool, really, really fun. I enjoyed this a lot.
Yeah, this is a good book.
Absolutely. One we didn't actually get to, but it's kind of cool, and we just wanted to kind of like
and we've read it before, so
it's called The Egyptian News. And so basically,
this is from Scholastic.
And they kind of tell the history story, but in the form of kind of like a large print newspaper.
Yeah,
and it's really, really cool, and you can kind of like pick through it. I think we did do this before.
I read it to her like a year or two ago. I don't remember the whole thing.
When we did Egypt for Around the World, we hit this. So anyway, just an honorable mention if you want to toss that in as well.
Yep, that can be a fun one.
We already showed you the hieroglyphic artwork, but another cool thing that we did this week was to draw King Tut, and Ariel found a really nice sheet here, which basically takes you through the process of drawing out the King Tut, kind of the head, the sarcophagus head that was on there. And it was really cool. And then she printed off the final product. And so I was able to give this to my daughter, and she was able to essentially do it, but she made the lips really pretty.
Yeah, and then we printed off, they had a coloring page version, so I printed off this for our 4-year-old. So while our older daughter was actually doing a freehand drawing, our younger was able to just color.
One of the things I really liked about this, they give you the guidelines, and if you can draw those guidelines on the page here for your learner, they can follow those guidelines and really mimic the artwork and do this really, really well. I like this a lot.
Yeah, this is it was a good fun exercise the kids really enjoyed.
Next one was designing a sarcophagus.
And
Sorry.
this is from the curriculum.
Yep. And so 4-year-old, obviously, doing that. And then we have this.
This is some fine art. I mean, for 4, I gotta say, good job, kid.
And we're back. Thank you for the edit there, Ariel. Today was my first successful volleyball coach day, and my throat is
This was a little tired.
A little tired.
So I'm gonna take over for him because he had a busy day coaching those girls.
I've never coached volleyball. I've never played volleyball.
He was excellent at it.
And I had 2 hours of notice.
Anyways, okay, so this is a designer sarcophagus, which is from the curriculum. So this is our older daughter did this, which is really fun. And then our younger daughter did the 4-year-old version.
Ancient aliens.
It's a recurring theme, isn't it? So anyway, this was a fun activity that we did from
Just wait till next week, guys, when we get to the Nausicaa Alliance.
You keep talking.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other things that we did was we watched a couple of great documentaries on Disney Plus. The first one was King Tut in Color.
I love this documentary.
This was fantastic.
So if you're going to read about King Tut and Howard Carter's journey through discovering Tut, what was wonderful about this is it not only took you through that discovery, but it took the old images and they turned them into color, and they took the videos and turned them into color, and it brought all this history to life, and it was so incredible. And then at the same time, they were talking about the story of the discovery, but then they were also talking about the technical aspects of colorizing these old videos, and it was really, really cool.
Yeah.
I loved it. 45 minutes long. You can do it in a single sitting. It was really, really good.
Yep, very good. The next thing that we watched also on Disney Plus, because Disney Plus has Nat Geo stuff, so that's why this is all there. So the next thing was Flooded Tombs of the Nile.
So down in the southern section where the Egyptian Empire or the Egyptian boundary met the Kushite kings, there's kind of like this border right there. It's sort of in like Sudan region, kind of the headwaters of the Nile, I think the White Nile, I think they call it. And the Kushite kings, I think, eventually kind of like became pharaohs towards the end. And down there, they had these amazing tombs everywhere. And one of them had been flooded. And they were going into this tomb, and they were having to do basically snuba to get under the water, get in through the tombs, through the tunnels, and get to the burial chamber that actually had collapsed. So they were in there. And the minute they get in there, they kick all this dust up, and the water becomes you can't see anything. So they're just going through with their hands. And these it's like extreme archaeology. It was really cool.
Very cool.
And what's kind of funny is that they're doing this in the winter. It's still hot out above the water. The water is super cold, so they're in wetsuits and they can barely see. It was just a really cool documentary. It's, again, about 45 minutes long, super interesting. And if you're just like tired of seeing King Tut stuff, seeing that there are other tombs and there are other kings and there are other things that haven't been found was really, really cool. And just to see it done in a different way, like you're used to like the Indiana Jones, dust everywhere, standing there with a head wrap, just waiting for, the sun is setting and all that type of stuff. You have those visuals in your mind. And then you see these archaeologists in the desert with scuba gear. And it just blows your mind. It's just a completely different expectation. It was really, really fun.
Yep, and so the next video you watched was about the Rosetta Stone.
The history of the Rosetta Stone. And there's a bunch of great videos on there, and I'll give one of the ones that we watched. We watched like 2 or 3 of them. Super cool. I didn't realize they found it during the Napoleonic era when Napoleon was, making his campaign through Egypt, and they just by chance discovered it when they were digging something up. And again, by chance, one of the officers happened to be kind of a natural historian or something like that and knew exactly what he was looking at, and they quickly packaged it up and got it out of there because they knew what that was, and it made its way back to, I think, Paris. But even then it took another like 30 or 40 or 50 years to just decipher. They knew the old Greek, but they had to figure out what the hieroglyphs were. And this, again, we have that story there that we talked about, pairs nicely with a couple of videos, and just the importance of the Rosetta Stone being able to unleash, thousands and thousands and thousands of years of unknown hieroglyphics. And all of a sudden, all this knowledge bursts forth just by having essentially a historical key that just kind of like turned and opened up this knowledge thing. I think my daughters really, really enjoyed that. Just understanding, driving home, it's like they got this one thing. They found this one thing sitting in the sand. And if I'm right, the Rosetta Stone talks about it's like nothing. It's nothing important. It just talks about like grain policy or like it was like a trade document in some respects. And It was nothing important.
And
It just,
unlocked everything.
but it was the key, and something very, very minor was a key to opening just an enormous amount of learning and understanding. I think that really struck home with them.
So the last bit of media that we want to talk about is I think it's the latest Assassin's Creed game. I know
right.
this is like random, but because they set part of it in some of these ancient civilizations and ancient Egypt is part of it, they actually sell a discovery module pack. So you don't buy the whole game, you just buy this kind of learning module where you get control of the guy and you can basically run around ancient Egypt and you can learn all kinds of things.
A lot of them have these paths that you follow, so you go from one point to the next, and then when you stop, it then teaches you something. So like you're running through the Great Pyramid and through the tunnels, and you're hopping over things and climbing down things and sliding down things, and all of a sudden you get to another waypoint, and then here's this like educational video about where you are and what you're doing.
So there's no part of the game, there's no fighting or killing or any of that stuff. This is purely educational. You just run around and it tells you cool stuff, and it's very immersive within this beautiful world that they built.
But
and
they also have videos on YouTube.
Yeah, so we didn't actually get this because we don't have a system for our kids to be able to navigate with that. So you can actually find full walkthroughs of this on YouTube, and they are multi-hours long.
10 hours long.
You can watch just pieces of them. We didn't even watch the whole thing, but we watched a bunch of it, and it was a really fun thing to kind of turn on in the background because our kids really enjoyed watching them kind of run around the Sphinx and then learn all about it and things. So if you've got a kid who really loves video games, this would be a great thing to pick up. And a couple times a year, they'll end up having sales, so you can be on the lookout. So I'll put a link in the show notes so you can see where that is. But
we'll put a couple links to some of the videos we watched.
Right, yeah. So this is a great one if you have a kiddo that loves the video game. This would be a fabulous way to learn a bunch in a very safe environment. So wanted to tell you about that.
Ariel, take it away. My voice isn't going to survive.
All right, so I think that does it for us with Egypt. We are finished. It was really great. It was, I think, everything our daughter wanted it to be.
It was.
Maybe next time she'll be old enough we can watch The Mummy and The Mummy Returns. But until then,
peak entertainment.
I mean, it's Brendan Fraser at his finest.
Yes.
So until then, we're going to get going here.
We're on to the Andes.
Yeah, we're going into ancient...
The Nazca Lines. I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens.
We don't mean this to be a theme of our show. So you'll find all the videos for this in a playlist for ancient civilizations, so you can go back through any of them. And if you haven't already checked it out, we do have an around the world journey that we did all the countries, and you can see what we did for that. So stick around for our vlog, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys.